very warm welcome to all of you who are joining us for the 10th South-South Forum on Sustainability. We see many old friends and new acquaintances here. Apart from the Zoom webinar with simultaneous interpreting in Putonghua, English, and Spanish, we are also live streaming in Putonghua for a Chinese audience. For the friends on Zoom, please click the globe icon and select your preferred language. I thank today's interpreters Salome Bustani and Mercedes Pico for interpreting in English and Spanish, and Huan Xiaomei and Dong Hanyu for interpreting in English and Putonghua. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Lau Kin Chi, coordinator of the program on Cultures of Sustainability, Center for Cultural Research and Development of Lingnan University in Hong Kong. I have taught in Lingnan University for 36 years. I'm also a founding member of the Global University for Sustainability and director of its executive team. I have been involved in the rural reconstruction movement in China for over 2 decades, and I'm also board member of Peace Women Across the Globe Association. Let me introduce the co-moderator and discussant, Professor Dai Tsinghua. Professor Dai is a leading feminist cultural critic in China. She is professor in the Institute of Comparative Literature and Culture and director of the Center for Film and Cultural Studies at Peking University. Her research interests include popular culture, film studies, and gender studies. She is author and editor of many books, including Invisible Writing, Cultural Studies in China in the 1990s, Breaking Out of the Mirror City, Cinema and Desire, Masked Night, The Writings of Subcommander Marcos, After the Post-Cold War, The Future of Chinese History, among others. Her works have been translated into English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Japanese, and Korean. Her literary and film commentary addresses a very large audience in China. Today, we are living in catastrophic times. No doubt at all about this. The crises we are facing are global in nature, both in their effects and in their causes. To be living in times of crisis certainly suggests that we are living on the edge and are about to fall. Yet, we are also at the edge, looking out to a beyond, with new horizons, calling us to go beyond ourselves and to go beyond the current systems of injustice and exploitation. For the elite, crises are opportunities to preserve the status quo and to gain more privileges, of course at the expense of the 99% that must be sacrificed. The 99% has learned for long that the 1% elite can never be saviors to solve the crisis or rescue us from our plight. For self-salvation, the 99% must have a will to go beyond, to break new paths. For this, some old habits will have to be cast away to make way for reconceptualization of conditions that operate at the unconscious levels. To break new paths suggests breaking away from seemingly natural and inevitable grounds. This means we need to critically re-evaluate and reconceptualize what seems obvious, unquestioned, and taken for granted. We started the first South-South Forum on Sustainability in 2011. We stopped for 3 years in 2013 to 15 due to budget constraints, but we have managed to organize a forum every year since 2016 with a minimal budget, but with maximal commitment from staff, volunteers, and interpreters of the Global University and Lingnan University. This has always been a project of selfless contribution and mutual care from the whole team. In the past 9 forums, every session was video recorded and uploaded for free access on our websites. From the themes of the forums, you can tell the focus of our concerns. The themes we have covered include Asia in the 21st century, challenges for peoples and movements, transformative visions and presses, ecology, livelihood, and community regeneration, climate change, global crisis, and community regeneration, the politics of hope, people's resilience and resistance in catastrophic times, the collapse of modern civilization and the future of humanity. For this 10th South-South Forum on Sustainability, the central theme is Thinking New Horizons. To go beyond habitual frames of thought and action in order to foster new approaches and form a strong alliance of hope of the South, we need new horizons of thinking. We are going to honor several critical thoughts striving in this direction, including ecofeminism, indigenous thoughts from Latin America, thinking generated from struggles in Africa and Asia, wisdoms from practices in rural regeneration and solidarity economy, and revival from cultural heritages of different modes of relating to one another and to nature, which are not capitalistic modes that are destructive of the earth and of human relations of love and reciprocity. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Lingnan University and Global University for Sustainability for organizing this event and generously offering their resources. I would also like to thank the 12 co-organizers with Arena, Green Ground Ecotech Center, and the institutes from Peking University, Tsinghua University, Southwest University, and Fujian Agriculture and Forestry University for their support all these years. We have been joined as co-organizers by Federal University of Espírito Santo from Brazil, University of Good Living, Multi-Track Misuca Exchange Community from Mexico, Society for International Development from Italy, and Daraja Press from Canada. Their intellectual input is most invaluable. In this inaugural session, we are very honored and privileged to have with us Dr. Vandana SHIVA. She was one of the 3 representatives of the 1,000 Women for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2005. I have personally come to know her since then. Dr. SHIVA is founder of Vandana and of the Research Foundation for Science, Technology, and Ecology in India. South-South Forum participants are familiar with her presence. She was with us in 2020 in a panel on livelihood, food security, and ecology. In 2021, she gave a lecture on Seeds of Hope, People's Resilience, Resistance, and Regeneration in Times of Public Health and Climate Disasters. In 2020, she gave a lecture on decolonizing knowledge to regenerate the earth and the future of humanity. Dr. Vandana SHIVA is much respected in the global community for her lifelong dedication in ecofeminism, biodiversity, food sovereignty, seed sovereignty, and anti-GMO and anti-globalization movements. She is a physicist by training. Her PhD was on quantum physics and the philosophy of science. She has written more than 20 books. They include Ecofeminism, Monocultures of the Mind, Soil, Not Oil, The Violence of Green Revolution, Who Really Feeds the World, Oneness versus the 1%, Earth Democracy, Making Peace with the Earth, Stolen Harvest, the Hijacking of the Global Food Supply, Biopiracy, Staying Alive, Women, Ecology, and Development. Her autobiographical book is Terra Viva, My Life in a Diversity of Movements, which chronicles her life, thought, convictions, and commitment to movements for life. Dr. SHIVA is not only a prolific writer and insightful philosopher, She is an activist, putting her thought to action and theorizing her practices. You can find her footprints in different parts of India and all over the world. In 1991, she founded the organization Naftania, which means 9 seeds or new gift, which works with the philosophy of a living earth and is a movement to protect the diversity and integrity of living resources, especially native seeds, and to promote organic farming and fair trade. This initiative established over 40 seed banks across India to provide regional opportunity for diverse agriculture. She received the Right Livelihood Award in 1993, which is regarded as an alternative Nobel Prize for livelihood. Today, Dr. Vandana Shiva will be speaking on eco-feminist philosophy for life and peace. Recently, in March 2023, Naftania published an eco-feminist manifesto, Making Peace with the Earth Through Diversity, Mutuality, Nonviolence, and Care. This reflects discussions, contributions, and written inputs at the gathering of diverse women for diversity from all parts of the world and from all walks of life. The manifesto urges for the promotion, protection, and practice of diversity, biological, cultural, economic, political, and in knowledge systems. It defends the eco-feminist and indigenous epistemology in which we continue to share and reaffirm the commons, knowledges for living, and the true sciences of life. Now, let us listen to Dr. Vandana Shiva, after which Professor Tsinghua will present a response. So, Dr. Shiva, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, and greetings to all who joined. Thank you so much, Lingnan. You maintained, themes every year that really address issues of our time. And I look forward to interacting with you, Tsinghua. Even though it's over Zoom, I am so happy that these bridges across our big civilizations are growing in the midst of the multiple crises that has been created by a common history that we share. My mind right now is going to how large parts of India were devastated for opium cultivation, and China was destroyed and then colonized through opium addiction. And that's how, in fact, if you really think of what the old system that has brought us to the brink is all about, it actually is totally encapsulated in how opium trade was the big money spinner. And I've read that many of today's big 1% got their original wealth through the opium trade, something worth following up as a common exploration between India and China. So the old paradigm that has brought us to the precipice, of course, has only one option if we continue on it, for the majority of people to go over the precipice, which is part of the design. Because as so many of the billionaires talk, we don't need the 99%. Zuckerberg has said that. The World Economic Forum says it on a regular basis. Their big advisors like, can't remember his name, but the philosopher from Israel, they all talk about, humanity will not be needed, except the few who control the rest. And then they actually, interestingly, he talks about Yuval Harari. He actually says the only way to deal with this now is to, is drugs and digital entertainment, playing games on smartphones. So the opium trade comes back as the kind of economy they want. because in the economy they've created, there's no place for life. There's no place for humans. There's only super profits, super exploitation, super divisions, and inequality. Let me just run through some of the key features of this old paradigm that has created the multiple crises, including its distorted illusions of who we are and how we relate to the world. We are part of an earth family. We are related to the microbes in the soil, the insects that pollinate our food, the plants that feed us. We cannot live without other beings. We are interbeings. But the old paradigm, which began with colonialism, began with declaring those that were being colonized, who were actually the sophisticated societies of their time. India was 25% of the world economy when the East India Company was created, and then we were invaded. And they reduced us in a few hundred years of British rule to 2%. I'm sure it's a similar history for China. And how did they reduce us to 2% from 25%? Through extraction, through creating new systems that have no place in civilized societies. Colonialism began by extracting our wealth. $45 trillion equivalent was transferred from India to England. And we've written many reports how from the schools to the prisons to the palaces, it was the peasant work of India that was financing the wealth of England. But of course, with that level of extraction, what was left behind was famine. 60 million people died. And we're being brought back to that similar situation. Nearly 1 billion people are permanently hungry. Hunger and famines were always temporary, localized in space and localized in time, because the earth doesn't create hunger. And people would go back and start producing food again. But the structural hunger creation is in the design of the economy, in the way food has become a commodity, in the way trade in food comes first, not feeding people. 90% of the corn and soya of the world goes for animal feed and biofuels for the rich countries to continue to have their systems run. So colonialism created a whole new category of primitive people and civilized people, even though the ones who were colonizing us had no quality of civilization, of evolution, of high values, of holding things together. They worked with brute force. And this was then projected onto the rest of our relationships. Anthropocentrism was created, the idea that humans are superior to nature and other species. Capitalist patriarchy was structured. Patriarchy has been in societies, but it was never part of the economic system. The economic system was a system based on the household. In fact, the word economy, like the word ecology, comes from oikos, which means our home. Ecology is the knowledge of our home. Economy is how we manage our home. And women were the primary managers of the economy inside the home and outside the home. So capitalist patriarchy, all of the idea of apartheid, which is based on separation, created in South Africa. And the language of apartheid is an Afrikaans word, which says separateness. That you are black, I'm white, I'm superior to you, and we must stay separate. Of course, you must slave in my mines and my factories. And I must grab your land. So the old paradigm is primarily a colonial paradigm, out of which grew the system that got the name capitalist, with three illusions. Illusion one, that a construct called capital is a creative force. You know, the creativity, whether it is the table I'm sitting on, the wood came from the creativity of the forest. Turning it into a table came from the creativity of a carpenter. Capital did not have any creative role except an extractive role, which is not a creative role, because creation is to make, extraction is to take. Second illusion, as Adam Smith in his famous book, The Wealth of Nations writes, we are born with competition in the womb, with the idea of competition and scarcity. No, the fetus is nourished by the mother and grows with the feeling of abundance and cooperation between the mother and the fetus. There's so many studies that now show how much that symbiotic relationship is. Another illusion, that nature is property, nature is raw material to be owned, traded, speculated on. I'm sure you will find similar things in China, but in India, it's something like 1783. Lord Cornwallis, with one stroke of a pen, declared the land and soil of India as the property of an island far away. That's when private property was created. Before that, land used to be the commons, used by individual families, but the rules of its use were always governed by the community at large. And it was never a tradable property. You could never extract the relationship. And if you look across the world, the takeover of Australia from the Aboriginal people when Captain Cook arrived, takeover of all of the Americas, 90% of the indigenous people killed, take over all over Africa, take over all of Asia. We're talking of a huge land grab. But it had pillars. And the two key ones that I want to share with you are, of course, my own field, science and knowledge. And I wrote a book, Staying Alive, to try and figure out, why is it that my sisters of the Chipko movement, Chipko was the movement of coming out to hug the tree. I said, how is it my sisters see the forest as living? They see the forest as a source of water, the source of soil, the source of oxygen. And the colonial system, which continued after independence, sees the forest as a timber mine. So I went to the roots of this construction of the world. I read every book of the founding fathers of science, books by the Bacons and the Descartes. And Bacon actually was given the task as Chancellor of England to not just do the witch hunts in England, but he became the father of modern science. And he called his book The Birth of Masculine Time. So far, knowledge has been effeminate, the knowledge of relationships with the living nature. Now we must subjugate nature and turn her into a slave to exploit her. And that book was called The Birth of Masculine Time. It's a capitalist patriarchal text. And nature was in fact declared dead. And a dead earth was very convenient to extraction, it was very, very convenient to colonialism. Combined then with the creation of private property, which was then legitimized by the writings of Mr. Locke. Yeah. So you have a father of modern economics, Mr. Adam Smith. You have a father of modern science, Mr. Bacon. You have a father of property and governance, Mr. Locke. You have a father of politics and power, Mr. Hobbes. And if you read, I read these books in my very mature years. And I said, how is it that they're still taught as classics in our universities to shape the minds of our young people, to live in illusions forever? The illusion of a reductionist mechanistic science. There is no bigger illusion than that. Because when you construct the living world as a dead earth, when you shape living systems that are self-organized, complex, interactive, in symbiosis, you create the ecological crisis. When you create private property, you basically create the enclosures of the commons, because all societies have managed ever sustains life as a commons, our water systems, our land and soil systems, our forest and biodiversity systems. To turn each of these into property is the beginning of the ecological crisis. You were introduced to the movement Vandana started. I started it because the corporations were talking about owning the seed through patents, and to do that, to introduce GMOs. And I said, but you don't make the seed. The seed is a continuity of creation, of evolution. It's the combination of the creativity of nature and the creativity of our peasant farmers. How can a Monsanto steal our cotton and put a patent on it, steal the soya bean, Asian crop, and put hundreds of patents on GMO soya bean and destroy all of Argentina, all of Brazil, all of the Midwest of the United States? So the whole epistemic paradigm has brought us to the edge because we don't even know how to think anymore about a living world and about life. Then the economy defined around capital, tells you nothing about how the economy really works. It is what Aristotle called primatistics. Economy is the art of living. Primatistic is the art of money making. What we have is the art of money making, so that we have a handful of billionaires who can make 500 billion in a year. Just in this last 6 months, the top few billionaires have made 800 billion more. Do they do anything? No. One sells junk fashion. The Paris group of fast fashion and designer fashion, Elon Musk, and the tech billionaires. The tech billionaires created by paying no taxes and by converting what is a commons, the basic codes, the basic software, into patented property, collecting royalties out of every action we have with our computers and our machines. So the economy was reduced to the art of money making. Profits was the driving force. Private property was an important thing. I mean, without patents, Monsanto wouldn't be the big corporation it is. Now that it's bought out by Bayer, their profits come from collecting royalties from peasants. And just like Indian peasants were pushed to famine by the extraction of the old colonialism, our farmers have been pushed to suicide by the extractivism of the new colonialism. We've lost 400,000 farmers to suicide since 1995, when globalization started and these corporations were able to enter our society. And the old seeds disappeared and the corporate seeds entered. That's why we created community seed banks, and we've actually created more than 150 by now. And these seed banks have seen peasants through cyclones and drought, but most importantly, just having your own seed means you don't spend huge money buying costly seed, buying it every year, getting into debt, losing your land, and committing suicide. So they're seeds of suicide And they're seeds of life and seeds of freedom and seeds of hope. And that's what Navdanya is dedicated to. The dominant economy is based on extraction. Extraction from nature, extraction from society. In fact, the work on surplus value is about extraction. Extracting the value that labor creates. Extracting the value that nature creates. And a big part of this is now a totally cooked up measure that began with the war. During the wars, they needed bigger armies, bigger jet planes, and they created the category of GDP, the gross domestic product. And in the national system of accounting, it says very clearly, if you produce what you consume, you don't produce. So nature's work disappeared because nature produces water and consumes water. Nature produces food and uses food to renew the food system. Women in the sustenance economy produce and consume. Sustainable societies produce and consume. So all of the real economies were turned to zero. And the extractive economy was all that was counted. But as I said earlier, extraction is not a creative act. Extraction takes what has been created by nature and society, and in the taking counts it as created by capital. The GDP is now being questioned hugely. Between the reductionist mechanistic paradigm of knowledge and war technologies, particularly in Hitler's Germany, we got the model of industrial agriculture. I wrote a book called The Violence of the Green Revolution. And since then, I've done a lot more research. The fertilizers came from the same companies that made explosives and bombs. And while the armies were fighting, the US corporations and the IG Farben and the German corporations were one. There was Standard Oil, which provided the fossil fuels, and IG Farben, one company. There was Mobe, Bayer, and Monsanto. They all worked as one, I call it the poison cartel. And what did that give us? How did it push it to a brink? Added with the WTO trade rules. The WTO trade rules on ag, actually, trade was going on before. The only thing that got added with the Uruguay round of GATT and WTO is 3 treaties. First, on intellectual property, owning the seed, which is what I was fighting and we resisted. We said seed is not a creation of Monsanto. Patents should not be taken on seed, and this is still my life's commitment. Cargill, the world's biggest, and the treaty was written by Monsanto. It said we were the patient, diagnostician, physician all in one. Cargill, the biggest grain trader. The vice president was deputed to lead the US negotiations. The treaty of WTO is written by Cargill. And what were they looking for? Capturing other markets. That's it. That was their only objective, and they have. I have watched how in my country, the entire edible oil economy was destroyed, the entire cotton economy was destroyed, and how Africa, most of the countries had enough food before globalization and structural adjustment. Today, most of them are import dependent. And the imports come from these giant corporations who grow no food, who do no work in a field. They merely trade. It's an extractive system. And I remember particularly in the year, I think it was 2002, the World Bank told us that we cannot store grain. It's a financial waste. They forced us to export our wheat. Our wheat gets harvested in April. We were forced to export 2 million tons, but we needed that wheat. So come October, we were having riots food. We re-imported 2 million tons. We exported at 60 rupees, $60 a ton. We re-imported at $120 a ton. The exports were done by Kargil, the imports were done by Kargil. In my view, actually, their ships were still sitting in the Indian harbors. It's just that they doubled what they earned. And we lost, the poor people lost food, and our country lost foreign exchange. And this is the pattern on every aspect of food crisis today. And then the third crazy treaty, particularly for societies like India and China, where we have the most sophisticated cuisine, diversity of foods. Pepsi and Coke, the junk food industry, and Nestle, wrote a treaty called the Sanitary and Phytosanitary Agreement, which basically is about safety. They declared all artisanal food, all local food, all food made by women, all food sold in street corners, all food that was made by hand as illegal. They criminalized it. And I have watched it in my country, how all the indigenous foods disappeared. Cold press mills that produce the purest oils, banned. Imports of soya and palm oil flood our market, 70% of our dependence, even though we were more than self-sufficient in edible oils and mustard and sesame and groundnut and coconut. We're the richest oilseed culture. Biodiversity disappeared. In my view, 90% biodiversity disappeared with the industrial monocultures. Why are we growing soya bean in the Amazon? Not because the Amazon Indians eat soya bean. It's for the biofuel and animal feed industry. A little portion goes into processed food. Billion people, as I said, are hungry. And a big part of my work in my book, Soil Not Oil, is at that point I assessed 45%, 45%, but my assessment is about 50% of the greenhouse gases come from an industrial globalized food system controlled by these corporations. 14% from the production, fossil fuels and fossil fuel chemicals, 20% by invading into the Amazon to grow soybean, another 20% to transport food for miles, which we call food miles, to take good food and add all kinds of additives and turn it into ultra-processed food that makes us sick. 75% diseases today are chronic diseases related to our processed food and chemical food. And then, because all of this needs lots of packaging, lots of plastic, lots of aluminum, the single biggest use of aluminum is now no more aeroplanes and cars. It is now food packaging because of the globalized system. All of that is another 20%. And when you create long distance systems and process food, you have to have a best before date. And that means a lot of throwaway food, 4% goes in waste. So the polycrises we witness are a result directly of the old paradigm, a combination of a mechanistic epistemology, a greed-based economy, and a poison-based violent agriculture system. So what are the new horizons? First is a new paradigm of knowledge. And let me share with you the manifesto we did collectively. We actually did collective drafting. And for those who think it is not possible for 50 women or 100 women to sit together, you know, the manifesto on making peace with the earth, which you can, you know, it could be mailed to everyone if you have it, or you can go to the Navdanya International website where you will find this manifesto to download. And please translate it into your languages, translate it into Chinese and share it. So on the eco-feminist epistemology, which is both the new sciences emerging from every discipline, from ecological sciences, let me just share the principles we have laid out. Eco-feminist epistemology and ontology follow the basic ecological principles of nature's laws. And these laws are diversity, not monocultures. Nature never works in monocultures. Nature's self-organizing intelligence creates, maintains, and regenerates diversity. Where there is biodiversity, self-organization occurs. The natural world constantly strives for enriching biodiversity. And then synchronicity. My PhD was based on non-locality. Now, non-locality in quantum theory shows you that everything is connected. And a lot of my friends who have been inspired by quantum theory have realized that in a plant, every part of the plant is changing in a quantum coherent way. The synchronicity of the changes. Every part, every cell, every molecule, every leaf, every root is in concert. A very, very important principle of symbiosis. Everything is related and everything helps each other. Symbiosis is the interaction between two or more biological organisms that help each other. We are being helped by other organisms. In society, we are helped by each other. That is symbiosis in the social level is community. Creativity. A seed becoming a plant is creativity. People taking crops from their field and turning it into a wonderful cuisine is creativity. Our gut microbiome, 100 trillion of them, taking the food we eat and turning it into our blood, our cells, the working of our neurological system, all of that amazing work is creativity. Homeostasis. There's a tendency to come back to a steady system. Equilibrium. In natural systems, there is a constant urge, even though there might have been a storm, but things recover. And then the law of circularity. Nature doesn't work through linear extraction, which is the law of capital. Circularity means the water evaporates, it's evapotranspired, it falls down as snow and rain and comes back and circulates again. I've just come back from the Bay of Bengal, which is the most impacted area by climate change. And that's why I was there distributing seeds to women of climate resilient rice, so salt tolerant rice. But working with the scientists there, I realized the problem is not just that these cyclones are increasing from the sea. The problem is we treat every drop of water entering the sea as wasted water. And we create dams everywhere to interrupt the flow. And this is a problem both China and India have, damming rivers nonstop. But when the fresh water doesn't go, that's where the erosion increases. That's where the salinity increases. And every problem of climate change is aggravated 100-fold more because the lack of the equilibrium between fresh water and salt water. So everything is in cycles. We've also defined the new horizons of the new economy, and we call it the economy of care. Because women and nature both work through the currency of care. And let me articulate this issue. The word currency means flow. Anything that flows, water flows, air flows, breath flows, nutrition flows, that's the food cycle. So flow is currency. And the real currency of life are all these qualities: the food, the water, the air, the breath, the care, the compassion, the solidarity. These things flow and relate, being to being, organism to organism, person to person. Colonialism didn't just change our ontology of how the world works. It reduced currency, which was a living phenomenon, into money and made investment the art of making money out of money. If you read Locke, it's all written in there. He redefined currency as money because that's what colonialism was about, and that's what capitalism was about, making money. So when you realize that what connects us in life is care and compassion, that's the economy of life, the art of living. Here are the principles: care for the earth and earth rights, human intelligence, autonomy, freedom and rights, regenerating community, reclaiming the commons, from competition to cooperation, from economics of greed to economics of care, from extractive to circular economies, from centralization and monocultures to diversity and decentralization, from authoritarianism and totalitarianism to democracy, from selfish thinking of my profits now in this moment to consideration and care for the rights of future generation, which in so many cultures, including ours in India, as well as the indigenous cultures of North America, we talk about the seventh generation to come. Whatever you have to do, think of the impact on the seventh generation. If it will leave a positive impact, take that step. But if you think it's going to cause harm, don't. Which is why, I mean, so many, printing, a Chinese innovation, fireworks, Chinese innovation. But we kept it all limited. We never turned it into a destructive force because we realized that thinking about the future generations is important. And from war and conflicts to peace and harmony. Because as you will have noticed, particularly with the ongoing conflict, that the military-industrial complex is the most profitable complex. And so much, the reason wars don't stop is that's where money gets made. Peace does not make money, but peace nourishes life. Now, with these new horizons and these new principles of knowledge and epistemology, of economy, what are the changes we have to make? And as you wrote in your introduction and spoke so beautifully, that the status quo is also fighting for survival. And it wants to survive at the cost of the 99%. Everything they're offering is an annihilation and extermination of the 99%. So they will survive. And I could give a lot of examples of this, but let me give you 3 of the most unreasonable ways in which, in the name of innovation, invention, and new science and new technology, absolute final planet grab is taking place. So just this morning, I think, the White House and President Biden have opened the gate. They've welcomed what Mr. Gates has been promoting, geoengineering. Now, we already have climate change because of pollution and use of fossil fuels. Solution to pollution is not more pollution, but Gates proposed geoengineering, which has put more pollution into the atmosphere, block the sun. And they say it'll cool the planet. No, it'll kill the planet because the sun is what gives life to this planet. The sunshine falls on the green leaf. It converts that energy and the carbon dioxide into the living molecules of life, the carbohydrates we eat, the oxygen we breathe. There is no technology that can surpass nature's technology. And nature, through this technology, turned this planet from a hot planet of 290 degrees centigrade to 13 degrees centigrade. From 98% carbon dioxide through the absorption, through the living green leaf, to 0.03. And they want to kill that process, to kill the very process that allows life on this planet and offer it as a solution to a life-threatening problem is basically saying we'll destroy the planet. So many of them anyway think they're going to live on Mars, even though it's a dead planet. So geoengineering, blocking the sun. And it's bad science. I mean, they're talking about it as innovation. This is stupid science. It is irresponsible science. It is junk science. Take food. We've eaten food, and food is the currency of life. The nutrition of the soil feeds the plants feed us, and our gut microbiome. And everything is connected. When there's poisons in our food, our gut microbiome is disturbed. When we eat monocultures, our gut microbiome doesn't get the food it needs. So many diseases now are being recognized just in the last 10 years as a destruction of the gut microbiome. We know 75% of the diseases today are because of ultra-processed food, which includes chemicals. So here they're offering fake food now, which is ultra-processed to the ultimate level. You don't allow the soil to work, you don't allow the plant to work, you don't allow the food cycle to work. As Bayer has said, we have a report on this, all this talk on lab food and plant-based food is brilliant for them, because now agriculture will be with digital agriculture on a large scale, farming without farmers. Food without farms is the slogan of Mr. Gates. Farming without farmers, food without farms. So what will be growing in these big fields? It's not that agriculture will stop. It'll be producing raw materials. Food has become a raw material. You could go into your field and pick a carrot and eat it straight, or harvest a rice and just boil it and it's ready to eat. Now it'll just be carbohydrates and protein as feedstock for labs. Just like soya bean, which is such a delicious food, was transformed into feedstock for factory farms, which uses 100 times more energy to produce in an inefficient way. My assessment is this factory food system, the lab food system, will use about 1,000 times more energy. And there is a new study that even though this is being offered in the name of solving climate change, just like geoengineering, it's a false solution, it's greenwashing. Studies don't get done, the propaganda spreads. There's a new study that shows it'll have 25 times more emissions. And I can say to someone who spent a lifetime understanding scientific systems, energy systems, physical systems, and food systems, that anything that uses more energy will create more entropy, will create more waste, will create more pollution. Finally, the whole issue of financialization of nature. This too is being rushed in the name of a climate solution and a solution to the crisis of ecology. And they're trying to create nature's markets everywhere. And they say by this, we will create nature's value, as if we don't value nature. We know nature's sacred. We know nature's priceless. We know every life form has immense value of life, not money. So they've created, just last year or the year before, 2 years ago, Rockefeller Foundation and the New York Stock Exchange created a whole class of companies called nature asset companies. And these basically are designed to take over the world's resources. And if you notice, indigenous people are being driven off their land because their biodiversity is now being grabbed by this new economy. Farmers are being driven. Just today, I've read about 4 areas: in US, in India, in UK, Netherlands. Farmers are being driven off the land to create nature reserves. So what will these nature asset companies do? Called nature asset companies, or NAC, the vehicle will allow for the formation of specialized corporations that hold the rights to the ecosystem services. Just get it. So first they created private property to own land, to own seed. Now they want to own the functions of nature as their property and their asset. The green leaf that does photosynthesis and gives you oxygen, that will be their property. So the specialized corporations, they hold the rights to the ecosystem services produced on a given chunk of land, services like carbon sequestration or clean water. These NACs will then maintain, manage, and grow the natural assets that commodify the part of the ecosystem that's valuable. That is how the forests of our Himalaya were commodified and destroyed so that there could be timber mines. That's what my sisters of Tsinghua rose against. Now, in the name of protecting nature, they want to extract the last bit of life from nature. And they are dreaming of a $4,000 trillion economy. And they're working very hard at it. And elements of this are biodiversity offsets, carbon offsets, zero budget, all kinds of new financial tricks combined with new fake science tricks. And the big shifts we need on New Horizon is first, of course, a paradigm shift that the earth is living in. We are members of a living earth. We're part of an earth family. That's the new ecological civilization. To live together in symbiosis with all beings on earth and as different cultures on earth. If growth was the extractive measure that has driven this machine of money making, degrowth has to be the way we grow life and shrink the greed economy. And of course we have to deglobalize. That's the work I do. We build amazing local economies, local seed banks, local ecological agriculture, local markets. And I want to give you two figures. By growing more biodiversity, we grow twice the amount of nutrition because we don't measure yield per acre, we measure nutrition per acre. And we can have more nutrition by conserving more biodiversity, not growing more commodities, but growing more nourishment. And the farmers in a local economy are earning 10 times more than those chasing the global supply chains, where there is nothing left for the farmers. Of course, reclaiming the commons, because without reclaiming the commons, we cannot grow the solidarity and community that we need to de-link from the domination of money. And I am so glad that there's a huge push right now for a de-dollarization of the world. And that is necessary because if these natural asset companies with trading in Wall Street has to be interrupted, we have to have not just other local economies with multiple currencies of food and water and love and compassion, but we also have to have other national economies with other currencies. So the new horizons are waiting for us to walk. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Vandana. You have posted the two posts where we should go for the word growth. So we should have the degrowth of the economy so that we can have the growth of biodiversity. You very beautifully talked about how we could be reclaiming the commons and how we should be growing more banks, and the word life is at the very center of your concern. So now I would like to invite Professor Tsinghua to give her comment. Please tune in to the interpretation to the English channel for those of you who wouldn't understand Putonghua.
Good evening, everyone. Am I clear? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kimchi. Thank you, South Forum. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to respond to the presentation given by Professor Shiva. This is a presentation about ecofeminism, and Professor Shiva made it around peace and life. For me, peace and life are two very traditional themes. Most of you can feel that for these two nouns, traditional concepts, they too in facing today's world have a very direct and imperative worldwide meaning, because we just finished the 3-year-long global pandemic. For this pandemic, it has been a risk for every one of us in the world. I like to use a word to describe it. In every corner of the world is eroding people's life. Right now, the war is still going on, and it is moving even closer to us. And meanwhile, Beijing has entered the 4th week of high temperature this summer. So we are facing a global abnormal of temperature of the world. It has impressive impact to people's life and health. In the face of such a specific crisis and scenario, we can have another chance to discuss peace and life rather than a simple blessing, rather than a simple dream. It is more about the reality. The most imperative, the most direct missions in our life. It is about people's life, health, our possibilities, our survival, our tomorrow, our future. So we've been dreaming about a brighter future. That is our mission. It is a future for better life for our following generations in a more reasonable and healthier manner. But these imperative risks have made us feel that the dream of tomorrow is impossible. It cannot happen easily, because most of the people in the world, in the face of the crisis today, their direct risks and task is to survive tomorrow. The Professor SHIVA's presentation has a moving beginning, and it inspires me a lot. It is a historical review of the UK's colonial experience from the very beginning of the Opiate War. The UK's defeat of its Netherlands enemy and its French enemies. The UK conquered the land and obtained the culture of opiate. And they were trying to find a huge market for the opium output. Also, they were trying to change the imbalanced trade relationship between the Qing Emperor in China and the UK Kingdom. So they staged the war. I'd like to make a kid. That was a national war of pure trade. That was a war to win market for pills, for drugs. In today's world, we are no more in a national and regional trade wars and aggressions. Rather, we are in a war that was staged with the help of media communication, a rapid economy. This rapid economy focuses more on entertainment, relentless entertainment. It encourages entertainment and a recreational living style. Yesterday, I noticed that on the largest online shopping platform in China, Tmall, there was a new word. Today, do you have dopamine? This slogan is very crazy, I have to say. In my observation, for the buzzword in China's society, desire is no more a fashionable word. Dopamine becomes a more fashionable concept, which can make people feel happy in a very short period of time. Dopamine means something that can make people feel relaxed. So this call, this appeal for entertainment, this market, and this reconstructed modern living style is not that right. We can realize that it has some relationship with the colonized history. Today, we are thrown into a new type of opium war dominated by the new type of capital. So this is the inspiration made by Professor Shiva's presentation at the very beginning. For me, with the help of organizers of SSFS Forum, I read many articles, reports, discussions made by Professor Shiva. So today, my response and my comments on ecofeminism is about her presentation, their manifesto, and their practice. Previously, I've long been a feminist, but maybe I will not say I am an eco-feminist, because for me, feminism has a very important meaning, that is anti-ontology. Ecofeminism has a precondition, that is the life of women, the relationship between women and nature, and as the breeders, as the persons who give birth to life, women have a very special departure meaning. So I have my personal understanding about it. But for me, in my own life, I've paid a lot of attention, a lot of energy, time, and work on environmentalist. I focus much more on life, the Mother Earth, ecology, and coexistence. So I am a feminist. I'm also an environmentalist. Me, myself, will not connect the two directly. Therefore, I will not say I am an eco-feminist, but I do agree the concepts of ecofeminism, especially the global view of ecofeminism. That is because in recent years, in our critical review about capitalism, personally speaking, I have my own mindset. That is, we tend to make the modern review separated from our critical thinking about capitalism. We tend to forget and ignore the interdependence between capitalism and the modern society. As a feminist, our critical thinking and practice against patriarchy tend to make us fall into a logic of modernism. I tend to say I want to be a human rather than a woman. When feminism becomes a pursuit of masculine power, it means we are more than women, we are individuals. So this is the fight of feminists. This is the critical thinking about colored races, and the minority of the world. For the grassroots, in their suppression, we focus more about the rights. How can we share the rights with the public common? In this process, we tend to ignore the modernism's relationship with environmentalists. Eco-feminism is an important way of critical thinking. It is important because it provides us with another mindset rather than the linear, progressive path to criticize capitalism. Ecofeminism also criticizes the modern civilization and the anthropocentrism and the patriarchy in modern society. They use another way rather than the traditional developed and developing separation to see the reality of the world. They use another way to review our life. They choose a totally different path. They focus more on the entire humanity survival, the Mother Earth, the vibrance of the earth, production, local production, agriculture, to review and criticize the modern civilization. So that is also the logic of modernization and capitalism. Ecofeminism provides us with a different value and embark on a totally different possibility. Even though I am not an eco-feminist, but I highly agree with the work done by eco-feminists. Professor SHIVA's presentation is precious because she specifically, as mentioned by Qingqi in the introduction part, Professor SHIVA make it more like a concept, and she also provides us with her thoughts in her review of capitalism, ecofeminism, that can be applied alternatively in every corner of the world. She provides us with a pursuit of alternative development. In this practice, it is not an abstract way to win the future for our following generations. It is more like a detailed way which can make our dream for a better future possible. So this is my personal insights. I'd also like to make some supplements to her presentation. In my observation, capitalism has a long process of exploitation of the rural areas. It is an extraction of the rural resources. It is a long process to marginalize the farmers and the peasants. So in China and other countries, rural areas, the rural areas are abandoned. Farmers and peasants become the grassroots, the person without power in modern society. So in both China's rural construction movement, we have been trying to provide the marginalized group and area in those underdeveloped areas, in those undereducated people. We have been trying to connect them with the modern society. So in our observation, we can see one of the progress of globalization is that the huge capital has been trying to reuse the marginalized group and area. Just like what has been mentioned by Professor Shiva, this capital has been regarding the farmers, the rural areas as new types of resources, worth of development. All over the world, the huge capital has been occupying, buying, and merchandising the land. Once again, they have been pushing the farmers away from their own land. They are trying to cancel the traditional culture, the traditional agriculture. So many farmers and peasants without lands are created by huge capitals in the face of this scenario. From the perspective of environmentalist, ecofeminism, feminism, and rural construction, how do we review our practice, our possibilities, and how should we, both in thoughts and in practice, to respond to this another round of massive capitals, aggression, and occupying of land? They even begin to make land no more a place where we can produce and live. Land is no more a possibility for us to regenerate life, to sow the seed, to harvest our future and fruits. This possibility is being eliminated by huge capital. In the face of this kind of new globalization, how should we review on it and how should we practice? I think capitalism is trying to embark on their new stage in which there are more difficulties, problems, and struggles for us. In this stage, we need to rethink the challenge posed by the capitalism. How should we respond to this struggle? And then finally, I want to say, what is quite relevant and pertinent to our topic is that the urban people who are connected to new media may feel that the tool, the software ChatGPT-4 is symbolizing a new round of shock proposed by new technology of capitalism. This shock, to some degree, also means that human beings how do we discuss human beings? How should we cooperate in economy? How should we share the resources with other people? And how should we practice the degrowth economy? Where is our development? Where are our possibilities? At the same time, we are trying to win the rights of life, work, and survival. We have to stand as one. We have to join hands with one another. Maybe we use the concept of dopamine to disseminate the conflicts, just as what has been done by the UK enemies. And this kind of separate of human. So from the perspective of ecofeminism, we are not encountering the problem of ecology, just like as Dr. Shiva has mentioned when she mentioned the seed bank and also the power of feminism, the values, the how to grasp the ideas of feminism. But at the same time, she is trying to let us to share with us her insight on the world crisis. Also, behind the crisis, what we see is this devastated world of the capitalism and the so-called globalized world that we are in. I always said that the feminism is not only the womenism, because what we are talking about, the questions of the topics, the problems of the topics of the feminism is not only about women, but the problems, the crisis shared by all the marginalized groups. So thank you again, once again, of the opportunity from the For South Forum.
Thank you, Professor Dai. So Professor Dai says that she would not call herself an eco-feminist, but she would agree with eco-feminist approaches for analyzing the dilemmas that we are in, and also to look for alternatives. So Professor Dai will be speaking at the very last, at the closing session of the forum on July the 30th. She will be speaking together with Professor Wang Hui on the question of legacy of a century, that is the last century, and the future for humanity. So thank you again, Professor Dai. So before I invite questions and comments from the floor, I would like to invite Dr. Shiva to respond to Professor Dai, to some of the questions that she mentioned. And please speak slowly, Vandana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Dai. And of course, you said you're an ecologist and environmentalist, and you're a feminist. And the minute you're both, you are an ecofeminist. Because ecofeminism is basically realizing that women are not a second sex. Women are not objects. Women are not property. Women are subjects. Women are human beings. And basic ecology recognizes that nature's living, other species are related to us, we depend on them. And the minute those two principles are taken into account, it becomes ecological feminism. Capitalist patriarchy basically is the merger of patriarchal power, violent power of domination, combined with the economics of greed, not just greed, but the construction of illusions. I think it's the combination of the two, you know? We've had greed before, but everything governed by total illusionary constructs that are then driving the world to the edge, as this year's South-South discussion is about. You know, we're at the edge, we look into new horizons. And capitalist patriarchy has basically said, nature is dead, women are a second sex. And the two go together, because to deny the contributions in society and to deny the contributions of nature is what capitalism is based on. You know? So of course you're an ecofeminist, Dr. And in any way, you know, ecofeminism is not a typical ism. Ecofeminism is really those of us who have struggled for life. Through those struggles, coming to new horizons, coming to new philosophies. you know, and having the power to question the old philosophy and the old paradigm. So it's really about pluralism, and it's about diverse ways of approaching both nature and society through the connection of life in its diversity.
Vandana, would you like to say anything more to respond to
the other point you made, Dr. Dow, of how the countryside is being emptied out? And it is so true, because that's what this industrial agriculture with the corporate agriculture model, its design is. I remember when globalization was being put in place, this current phase of globalization, I started to focus on agriculture. And I used to read all the documents that were coming out of the United States government as well as the corporations. And there was no difference between the government and corporations. One day a Monsanto representative would be agriculture minister, state secretary, or secretary of agriculture, and next day they'd be back in Monsanto. And this used to go, we called it the revolving door. But I read at that time a US Secretary of Agriculture earlier having written that just like you squeeze the last bit of toothpaste out of a toothpaste tube, yeah, I just show this to you. So, you know, any tube, by the time it finishes, you start to squeeze it. And they said we have to squeeze the last farmer of the land, like we squeeze the toothpaste out of the toothpaste tube. So that's the philosophy. You have to get rid of the farmer. Why are they scared of farmers? Why are they scared of women? Why are they scared of life? You know, when I organized a 500,000 farmers rally in 1993 in Bangalore, brought farmers from around the world, all the farmers from around different parts of India, and this ocean of farmers was sitting. And I then realized that the independent small farmer working with the earth is the most free person in the world, because they use their labor, they work with nature. They don't need anybody else. Of course, if they use chemicals, they need chemicals, but good farming doesn't need it. So they're scared of that freedom. The freedom of having your own seed, freedom of having your own food, the freedom of you being able to create an economy with the land. And I think the war against farmers, I call it the war against farmers and the war against the countryside, is basically a war against freedom. Because when I talked about fake food, yeah, they would like everyone to be dependent on morsels. And then they're already talking about, we should be feeding people insects. We should be feeding people recycled feces and, human waste. There was a film called Soylent Green years ago. And in it, society had been divided into two big classes. And there were the rich, the elite, who made the rest work. And the rest worked like slaves. And towards the end of the film, this person is screaming and saying, don't eat what they were fed, called Soylent Green. It turns out they used to grind up people who had died, just like the mad cow diet, ground up dead cows and fed them to cows, and then the mad cow disease spread. They used to grind up the dead people, turn them into the Soylent Green, and feed them to the slaves. Now that's the world that was imagined in that film, but is a world that the billionaires are actually imagining. And for those who have a background in Marxism, when Marx talked about the metabolic rift, which was put forward by Liebig, the metabolic rift for him was both an illusion of separation from nature, but ultimately it leads to a division between the countryside and cities. But in the cities, people consume. In the countryside, people produce. It's not that production ends, but it becomes concentrated and becomes more and more fake. And when you draw our attention to the emptying out of the countryside, it is really about the emptying out of our deep humanity and our deep freedom. And that's why I am a big promoter of returning to the land. We call our big 1-month course on ecological farming, we call it Return to the Earth. Because it's about realizing we are earth beings, we are Chinese and Indian at a superficial level because our countries were created. But we can't escape the fact that we live on food and water and breath, and all of this is provided by the earth and by nature and by other beings. So the challenge of emptying out the countryside, not just as what's happening, but as the actual plan for the future, where that economy I talked about, 400 trillion, when they talk the new language, all cooked up, called nature-based economy. Nature-based economies, we'll own it. They think 30% for nature. They say we'll drive the fishermen out and own all the coast and build resorts. We will drive the pastoralists out of the Maasai land, and we will own the pastures and build tourism complexes, because the Maasai have protected the indigenous landscape. So they're going wherever people have protected nature, grabbing it and calling it nature-based for continuing their greed economy. So words will be used in all kinds of ways. And that's why a part of delinking that you will be talking about, celebrating Samir Amin, I think a delinking has to be all in the mind, in our languages. We have to get out of the colonizing language, including the new language being created, and speak about reality in our multiple languages with the rootedness, the authenticity, and the autonomy that our languages give us. So thank you so much.
So Professor Dai would prefer to have other inputs from the other participants. So I see on the chat that there are some questions. Okay, so I'll read some of that out. If they are in Spanish, then I cannot. So those asking questions in Spanish will have to ask them yourselves, and we will rely on our interpreters. Okay, we have one question from Ao Yuanji. So he's I think he's trying to say, the question is, how can Marxist critique of capital contribute to ecofeminism, communism, and the critique of global capitalism? I think this is a question from Mohammed. Yes.
Yeah, I think first by realizing the illusions on which capitalism is based, and resisting the new enclosures and the new enslavements, and creating our freedoms. And as I said, just like for degrowth, we need to create another system which grows life, grows well-being, grows equality, grows justice. In a similar way, we have to grow other economies, because there is no place in the design of the future that the 1% has shaped in their minds. There's no place for us. And they're trying to take away the earth so that we can't take care of ourselves. That's where the big resistance and conflict is going to happen. Of taking back our land, taking back our seeds, defending our water, defending.
Yes.
Yeah, so I said reclaiming life, the life that nature gives us, but reclaiming our relationship with living systems so that we can create our own life through other production systems. We've got to reclaim production. We've all been reduced to, we've been denied life, that we are living beings. We've been denied producers. That's how the countryside is getting empty. But we are being asked, all of us, being asked to be consumers. We can't, you know. If we are not playing a creative, productive role in the economy, you know, we will not even have our basic needs met. So we have to first identify what is vital to life and not get trapped in what I call the new opium trade. The opium today is a different, you know, still the old addictions, but new addictions too. And how we basically it's the challenge of staying free.
I would like to invite Ella to ask a question. Vandana, you may remember Ella, who is the little girl, the two sisters that sent you poems and also and also drew paintings. Ella is now on an exchange visit to Shanghai, but she would like to ask a question. Ella, please go ahead.
So hello, Dr. Vandana Shiva. Thank you for your very good talk. I would like to ask you a question. So how can we as young people form communities that focus on developing more symbiotic relations to strengthen the health of the planet instead of finding like geotechnological ways to solve problems? Thank you.
Create symbiosis. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to care for each other. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We have to not fall into the trap of competition. You know, why do people not work together? Because they're made to compete with each other. The single principle of globalization was compete. You know, countries compete and destroy each other. Individuals compete and destroy each other. Cooperation is the way and symbiosis is the way. But now that we've been pushed into this economy of competition, we have to unlearn competition and relearn cooperation and care. That's how symbiosis will grow. Second, we have to be much, much more aware of how nature works so that we can learn from nature. Let me give you just two simple examples that I have learned by watching nature. So in good ecological soils, there's fungi or mycorrhizal fungi, and this really gives the life to the soil. In 1 cubic inch, there can be as much as 8 miles long fungi. Now, the fungi doesn't create nutrition, but the fungi can go to remote parts, understand what the plant needs, bring the nutrition that this particular plant needs from wherever it is, and give it to the plant. And meantime, the plant gives it carbohydrates, which is what the fungi needs to nourish itself. So each of them give to each other by recognizing what the other needs. And if we start functioning like that, like mycorrhizal fungi, we will be able to build symbiotic relationships and take care of each other and build other economies. The second is the flower of a plant. You know, when you plant a seed, it goes into a plant and it then has a seed, a flower, which then is, and the flower is pollinated by a pollinator, including bees and butterflies. What does the bee and the flower do? The flower has pollen, and the bee is able to take pollen from plant to plant and cross-pollinate and fertilize the plant and make the next generation of the plant. And what does the plant give to the bee? It gives it the nectar. And the nectar then turns into the honey, which is not just the food for bees, for others too. So if we start realizing if the bees can do it and the mycorrhizal fungi can have symbiotic relationships, surely we as humans can build that capacity even if we have forgotten. Because the potential is there in us. You know, the quantum theory teaches you there's nothing fixed in the world. You know, the world is not full of things. The world is full of potential. So the potential of human beings to give mutually, to be able to cooperate, to be able to be compassionate and caring, to build community, to live in the commons, that potential can never be destroyed. It's waiting, just like the seed can wait for years till you plant it in the soil and it gives you the plant. So our seeds of our potential are waiting. And we just have to be aware of what that potential is and practice it in our lives. And begin with whatever around you, you can make change. Begin with your family, begin with your friends, and from there the community grows.
Thank you, Vandana. We can all see how you love to talk to children and young people. Yes.
So good.
Now,
no, I can't see, Ila,
yeah,
but so
yeah.
good to connect with that. It's like the South-South dialogues are about generations, and it's, seen them as little girls, and I think by the time you will continue. I know there'll be a 20th session, and then there'll be grown girls who've already built community.
Yes. So now I invite Ashley to make your comment, please, Ashley.
Thank you, Vandana, for a great presentation. I've got a question relating to climate change, and in Western countries, what is being called the green or clean energy transition is being strongly promoted as the answer to climate change. It's a technological approach that it's supported by the likes of the World Economic Forum, Bill Gates, George Soros, and it's heavily reliant on the finance sector. And it's also associated with it is carbon trading organised by the finance sector. What are your views on this approach? And is it more about profits, new industry and new markets than genuinely addressing environmental problems?
So, because I look at these issues in their scientific perspective and the relationships, and I look at it in the ecological perspective of how systems work and how living systems work. So my three responses to this is everything is energy. Everything is energy. Living systems are energy. And as Schrödinger, leading quantum theorist, one of our teachers of quantum theory, he realized that living systems are different from machines. Machines take energy and generate pollution. Living systems create energy and have negative entropy and never create waste and pollution. Now that's the big issue. Yeah. So if we know, as I said in my talk, if the earth has her technology through photosynthesis and microbes and plants to reduce the temperature and is the most renewable thing, I save seeds, and next year I save most, the seeds are renewable. The problem with the anti-life paradigm is it doesn't see life. It doesn't see living systems. It doesn't see the energy of living systems. It doesn't see the self-generated energies and the negative entropy energy. Negative entropy is no waste. Entropy is waste. It's wasted energy, but wasted pollution. So my first thing is, if nature has her technologies to do the job much better, why aren't we growing more of the plants that will do the photosynthesis? That would have solved this problem long ago. The peasants would have stayed in the countryside. We'd all have had food on our farm. We did research last year, the peak of heat. The newspapers are talking about heat this year. There's been not the kind of heat of last year. Last year's heat, the temperature difference between the soils on our farm, where we have lots of trees and lots of biodiversity, and the neighboring farms that grow chemicals and are bare, you know what the temperature difference was? 25 degrees centigrade in the soil. That's what can kill plants. Now, a solar park or a wind park cannot do three of the things that nature's technology of generating energy can do. One, it cannot give you food. Two, it cannot cool. Three, it cannot give you oxygen to breathe. So here we are, it's amazingly abundant systems, which we are so blind to. And we are saying, oh, let's use more materials. And one of the worst is the whole electric car issue, which is forcing the trashing of working cars. We've lost our car in Delhi because it was 9 years old and it was good, it was strong. And in 10 years, it has to be phased out. It was junked. There's no market for it. Now that means wasted material. So you build new cars, you take all of the new minerals, you mine and mine and mine, and then you go to Bolivia and wherever else you can find, you go to the Congo to get the cobalt, you go and mine for all the rare metals that make the electric system work. And the Energy Commission has said it'll need 600 times more materials than the world has if the whole world had to go electric. 600 times more material than the world has. So yes, it's about money. Two, it's about stupidity. Three, it's about blindness.
I'd like to invite Yan Yu Qing, who had asked the question. Yes, please.
Right. I asked a question that's very similar to what Ella just asked. It's about really integrating, like about more like the personal level, how you can, as we are like researchers and scholars, how we can like really pass on this message, because my understanding is that you can do a lot of things like through policies, through laws, through building institutions. But fundamentally, like I believe changes come really from within, and you really have to be like, the beacons to your communities and your groups. And I just wonder, like the special path that we chose, as scholars and researchers, like how can we make impact? Sometimes it's really just like very frustrating, like working as a PhD and then restrained by, like the institutional designs, like you probably have to like, be embedded in a university or like certain career path. And it's like, how can you still be like authentic and then stay true to yourself and then still like continue on this path? This question is like more at like a personal level, I guess. But I think that's like the core. It's like the layer that sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. In 1982, I left an academic life to create the Research Foundation for independent research. And of course, it was hugely risky.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're in a university, you get a check at the end of the month. And if you just say, I'm going to look for where I can serve, which community needs me, you have no idea of where your life will take you. Yeah? So you got to trust life. I think one thing to be deeply aware of in our times, which is the theme of this time's the 10th session, New Horizons. Now, New Horizons mean old paradigms are shaking up. Of course, the elite are clinging to the old paradigm to sell new technologies. The paradigm is still old. It's still mechanistic. It's still separation of humans and nature. It's still about machines substituting life. But the technology being generated is new. The electric car is new. Solar panel is new. But the mindset is still old of separation from nature. Nature is dead. And we as consumers. Now, while among the elite, this whole paradigm is still working, among the people as more and more of the crisis which Kim Chi introduced in her introduction, everyone is facing that crisis. The poor are facing the crisis because they're being wiped out by climate havoc or a war. They're becoming refugees. They have no food. People in England are facing a crisis because of cost of living. People in France, protests began because they were raising the retirement age. And it began as a right to work. And for months, people marched. And now there are actual riots all over the place. So everywhere we are seeing this breakdown and this collapse happening. And therefore, how do you deal with authenticity, with an academic life, knowing that it could not, it probably won't be the same for a long time. First, you use your opportunities to find out how you can contribute to what you have learned to society and to nature. And if there are restrictions that is put by the academic system, do that work on the weekends. That's how I joined CHIPCO. On weekends, in holidays, I would just go volunteer. Nothing in life says, if you're an academic, you can't be a social activist. Nothing says that if you are scholarly, you can't be in a movement. Combining those two streams, which are essential to everyone, is really about living a full life. So find a way in which you can combine the two.
谈顶酒, would you like to speak? You also posed a question.
So I have a question for Dr. SHIVA. So my question is, in Marx's Communist Manifesto, if I paraphrase it correctly, Marx mentioned that in order to compete for profits, the bourgeoisie fought against other classes and even the hostile themselves, and sometimes they sought help from the proletariat. My question is so Marx also pointed out that peasants and landlords were the groups that faced being wiped out during the expansion of capitalism. So my question is, may I ask what enlightenment Marx's observations on the relationship between agriculture and capitalism have for us? And are there any limitations of Marx's theory in expanding today's ecological dilemmas? Thank you in advance.
Yeah, I think at the peak of an early Marx, he was looking at what industrialism was doing to workers. And his theory of surplus value, his theory of extraction through surplus value are all about the industrial system. But over time, he started to look more closely at the relationship of humans and nature. And that's why I mentioned the word metabolic rift. Now, Liebig was a German scientist, and I've done a foreword to the translation of his book, which was in German, but is now published in English. Liebig was the father of organic chemistry. And he's the one who really worked out the whole nitrogen system and all the issues of soil fertility and the uptake of nutrients. And then, of course, with colonialism, monocultures and trade started to grow and soil fertility started to get exhausted. So they had turned nitrogen into a commodity, first as guano, the bird droppings from Latin America, and then eventually into fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers. And he had basically said, we are creating a metabolic rift, that these systems regenerate themselves in nature. He wrote a book, the book he called was In Search of Recycling, the circular economy I talked about. Now, from that metabolic rift, Marx took that idea into basically the relationship with nature and the relationship of town and country. So read the stuff on the metabolic rift. That is where his ecological contributions come from. And another place where his ecological contributions, I remember, I mean, this was 50 years ago, when I was active in the Chipko movement, I was addressing the forest question a lot. And he did a lot of work on the forest question because the forests were getting enclosed, you know, and people needed forests as commons for firewood, for other things. So the commons is addressed, the metabolic rift is attacked, and I think we do need a revisiting of these concepts.
Thank you. So Simon, I've unmuted you.
Yes.
Please try
Hello?
to speak. Yes.
Hello? Okay. So this is more of a social question. In some regards, the nuclear family is still regarded as sort of a progressive or liberating institution. But when we look at nature, the handful of species that undergo menopause, like orcas, elephants, great apes, they all form intergenerational groups. So I thought, what's your thoughts on returning or keeping alive intergenerational households, and how to avoid sort of traps of these sort of traditional family formations, also keeping alive sort of old hierarchical and patriarchal family structures?
Well, there's nothing that says that intergenerational relationships, as well as relationships between women and men, must essentially be hierarchical. I mean, those are the constructs of patriarchy which creates this. But it's our freedom to create other relationships. Men and women can live in other relationships. And I'm seeing a whole generation of young people who are going beyond the patriarchal definition of what a man does, what a woman does. And I don't think that, you know, just like the idea that we are individuals, like Margaret Thatcher said when the neoliberalism was being put into place of the rule of the market. I remember when she was questioned and she said, there's nothing like a society, they're only individuals. And neoliberalism needed the reduction of society to individuals. Early capitalism needed the reduction of families to nuclear families. Because if there were extended families, and just like workers fought for their rights and women fought for their rights, women's rights, redefining families, were already at work. And extended families of a new kind were a total possibility. But if we are an extended family, we will produce, we will consume, we will give support to each other. In a nuclear family, you're only consumers. There's nothing like production taking place. But just like an individual can't do the community work, a nuclear family cannot perform all the functions that an extended community makes. So all the tribal societies I know have no nuclear family. Yeah, some of them live in big homes, 100 people together. And this is from India all the way to Malaysia, Borneo. If you go to the Amazon, you have one round circular hut. Everyone is living there in a hammock. So capitalist industrial society is what created the nuclear family. And if we have to go beyond capitalism, we have to go beyond this ideology, then we have to create extended communities. And we have to live like a family, as a family of the earth where other species are our relatives, but as extended families of community and narrower community groups that we can call family. But society has had pluralistic options, and we need to turn to them and realize that the nuclear family was an aberration. The idea of an individual was an aberration. And we have to now create from the best of what, as I said, our potential is what kind of family. I mean, there's so many places where now there's eco-villages where they're living as communities, 50 households sharing a kitchen, sharing a garden, sharing childcare. This is happening now, and it can happen more. So we are not individuals. When Margaret Thatcher said there's nothing like a society, it's only individual, she was wrong. There are no individuals, there's only community. And therefore, recognizing community and cultivating community is our work.
Thank you. So Margot wouldn't want to speak, but then she put in one comment in the chat box. She said that Dr. Shiva's last point was that we can both relate to academy and be deeply engaged in and be part of our communities. The latter must be a central source of how we theorize. So thank you, Margot. So I am going to...
Could I just add to that?
Yes, please.
That just like hierarchies were created between men and women, between humans and nature, the hierarchy of knowledges, there's experts, an absence of knowledge is so false. Margot is so right, that my knowledge that has grown by being part of movements and activism is so much wider and deeper than what books can teach me. I can read 30 books, but one struggle teaches me much, much more that'll never find space in the books. So activism is a big university.
Thank you. So Vandana, would you like to say any word to conclude this session?
To say thank you to you, and thank you to all who joined.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much again. It's always so your talk is always so inspiring and illuminating. So Vandana talked about the financialization of nature. And I would like to draw your attention to one session that we are going to have on July the 11th. That is the question about the financialization of health, which also means the financialization of our life. So that will be moderated by Nicoletta, and she's also part of the initiators for the manifesto that Vandana has been also part of.
Yeah, diverse women, yes.
Yes. So Nicoletta Dantico, she will be she has organized this panel on Against Health for All, 30 years of health financialization. So please come in. And then for tomorrow, we are going to have a session which has been put together by the University of Buen, Vivir, Good Living. So we are going to talk about good living, philosophy, and practice. Then on Sunday, we are going to have this session on the insurgency of the peoples. We are inviting two persons, Jorge Ishizawa and Jorge San Diego from Mexico and from Peru, who have been working long time with the indigenous communities. And they're going to have a dialogue. And so we have very exciting sessions. This time, we are not going to exhaust you all. Last year, we had 35 days in a row without any rest. And everybody was exhausted at the very end, although very enriched by the discussions. This year, we are going to have 20 sessions until the end of this month. So please join us again for all the sessions. And once again, my big thanks to Professor Dai for co-moderating and responding in this session. And great thanks to Vandana, to your bright smile, your encouraging words, and your visions full of hope and of love. Thank you. Thank you all for coming, for joining this session.